hope rekindled. Before we knew it, summer in Seoul is approaching. The sun is hot from the morning, and the busy noise of the city continues. Min-soo and Jiyeon's lives may seem peaceful on the surface, but deep inside, unresolved conflicts are still present. Jiyeon finishes getting ready for work and leaves the house. Before leaving the house, she sees her daughter Jiyeon heading out to go to school, feeling the sense of responsibility on her small shoulders. Jiyeon looks at Jiyeon and makes a promise to herself.
I won't pass on to Jiyeon the suffering I've experienced.
Jiyeon stops by a coffee shop on her way to work. Holding a cup of coffee and looking out the window, she recalls the hardships of the past like a passing shadow. The tough times have made her heart stronger, but the relationship with her in-laws is still an unresolved issue. Jiyeon drinks her coffee and decides,
Today, I need to honestly express my feelings to my mother-in-law.
The day at work passes by busily as usual. Jiyeon silently manages her role in various projects. But in her mind, the thought of visiting her in-laws in the evening to express her feelings is present. As the end of the workday approaches, Jiyeon calls Min-soo.
Min-soo, I want to go to the in-laws' house this evening to talk.
Min-soo is silent for a moment before responding.
Sure, do as you please. I trust your decision.
After work, Jiyeon heads to the in-laws' house. When she enters, her mother-in-law greets her warmly, but the critical gaze towards Jiyeon is still present as always. After dinner, Jiyeon gathers courage and speaks to her mother-in-law.
Mother, I have something to tell you. I have been through a lot. I try to understand your words, but I have also lived diligently in my own way.
Her mother-in-law seemed momentarily taken aback, but soon replied calmly.
Yes, Jiyeon, I'm sorry for not understanding your feelings. We also worried about you in our own way.
Jiyeon's eyes become teary at her mother-in-law's response.
Mother, I will try to understand your feelings as well. I hope we can understand each other little by little.
This conversation eased the tension between the two. Jiyeon feels hopeful about gradually repairing her relationship with her in-laws. On the way back home, Min-soo holds her hand tightly and says,
Well done, Jiyeon. I can live more diligently because you are here.
Jiyeon holds Min-soo's warm hand and thinks,
We must remind each other that our efforts are never in vain and endure the tough times.
A small spark of hope blooms in her heart once again.
Hey, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
This is where we take that stack of sources you've shared with us and, well, we dig in.
Yeah, pulling out the key insights of things you really need to know.
Helping you get properly informed fast. Today, we've got something a bit different.
Definitely. It's a story.
Right, a serialized story told across 5 parts. It follows a couple, Min-soo and Jiyeon, over 16 years.
Navigating marriage, family, all the big stuff.
And financial pressures, too. The sources lay out their journey, and we're going to follow that path. We'll start at the beginning, touch on the early challenges.
Then really focus in on part 4.
Exactly. That seems like a real turning point. And then we'll see where part 5 might be heading.
You know, these kinds of stories, the ones rooted in, like, real-life relationship struggles with in-laws, money stress, they offer such valuable insights, don't they?
Yeah.
Into communication, resilience.
How people cope.
Yeah, how relationships adapt, or sometimes, well, struggle to adapt over time. It's more than just a story. It kind of reflects universal stuff.
Totally agree. So, okay, our mission today, trace Min-soo and Jiyeon's core journey through those first few parts, then really unpack part 4, the events, the feeling.
But dynamics.
Right, and see how that sets up the conclusion in part 5. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
So the story kicks off in 2007. Min-soo and Jiyeon get married near Seoul.
Right, and they start out in an apartment, 200 million won.
Yep. And the sources mention Min-soo's family helped them buy it.
Yep.
Fast forward 16 years. Now they're a working couple. They've got a daughter, Jiyeon.
Middle school age.
Right. And while, their assets have grown, the sources are really clear, it was not an easy road.
No. Definitely not. And those challenges, they're there right from the beginning. Jiyeon's exhaustion, trying to juggle work and family.
Yeah.
And it got really intense when she was the only one earning money for a bit, right? When Minsu was changing jobs.
While she was pregnant, no less.
Exactly. But the biggest, most consistent stress, it sounds like it was criticism from Minsu's family.
Yeah, the story gives some pretty specific examples, comments on her clothes, too flashy.
Right, questioning her lifestyle, like she wasn't frugal enough anymore.
And even suggesting her remote work wasn't, real work. Like it was just something she did while watching the child.
Oof. And that they weren't saving enough. That kind of constant scrutiny.
And wasn't there something particularly harsh from the father-in-law?
Yes. A really painful moment mentioned. Comparing their daughter, Jiyeon, to a deceased sister. It sounds like it came across as really dismissive of Jiyeon, too.
Wow. You can just imagine the toll that takes. And the story shows these interactions often led to fights between Minsu and Jiyeon.
Right. Minsu felt awful for her. Apparently, he even suggested they just, stop visiting his family.
But for Jiyeon, it felt like everything they were working for, all their sacrifices were just being dismissed.
And negated,
Ugh.
which, understandably, made her want to pull back from them.
So the story moves into part 2, and that tension is, it's still very much there.
Yeah, Jiyeon's described as really grappling with the stress. Like, how do I even fix this?
Minsu tries to be supportive, suggesting a walk in the park, things like that.
But then, almost like clockwork, a phone call from his mother just brings it all rushing back.
More criticism.
Yep. Not visiting enough, worries about Jiwon's grades. The usual stuff, it seems.
And it's in part 2 that Minsu says something important, right?
He does. He tells Jiyeon she shouldn't have to suffer like this anymore.
Yeah.
That he will handle the family issues.
How does she react?
The story says she feels maybe a little bit of relief, but the anxiety doesn't just disappear.
Understandable.
Yeah. And part 2 kind of ends with her deciding, okay, I need to be brave here for my family's sake and trust Minsu's going to back me up.
Which leads us to part 3. And the sources frame this as maybe the start of a change.
It's a small shift, yeah. It highlights Jiyeon's psychological struggle. She's actually taking medication daily for peace of mind.
That's significant.
It really is. And Minsu feels this heavy weight, this responsibility for his family's happiness.
And there's that key moment. Jiyeon decides not to go to the in-laws one weekend.
Right. Minsu worries a tiny bit she might regret it, but she stays home. He goes alone.
And he still gets the criticism.
Oh, yeah, the usual comparisons and complaints. But something's different in him. The narrative says he gets Jiyeon's pain on a deeper level now. He even reflects on how he didn't fully understand before.
So what does he do?
He talks to his mother, carefully. He says something like, Mom, Jiyeon is having a really hard time. Can we try to understand her just a little more?
Wow. That must have taken some courage.
Definitely. And his mother's reaction, according to the story, there's a pause.
Okay.
But then she actually says, I know Jiyeon suffers, and agrees to be a little more considerate.
That's something. It's not everything, but it's something.
Exactly. It's acknowledgement. And when Minsu tells Jiyeon later, the story says, even though loads of problems are still there, it gives her comfort.
She realizes, what was the phrase? Small changes can bring big hope.
That's the one. And they sort of reaffirm their commitment to rely on each other, trusting these small shifts will lead to bigger ones.
That moment really stands out. Minsu stepping up, initiating that dialogue. It created an opening, didn't it?
It really did. And it makes you think, doesn't it? How much courage does it take sometimes just to ask for a bit more understanding within a family?
Yeah. And how powerful that small act can be. So that brings us to part 4. Where does the story go from there? This is where it really heats up, right?
Right. So part 4 opens. It's summer in Seoul. On the surface, things seem calm.
But underneath?
That unresolved conflict is still there. Jiyeon's getting ready for work. She sees Jiwon going to school. And she feels this weight, thinking about her daughter's future. And the story gives us this internal resolution she makes. I won't pass on the hardships I've faced to Jiwon.
That's a powerful motivator.
Totally. Then later, she's grabbing coffee, thinking about everything she's been through. She recognizes it's made her stronger, in a way.
But the in-law thing is still hanging over her.
Exactly. It's unresolved.
Yeah.
And right there, she makes another big decision. The narrative says she thinks, today, I need to tell my mother-in-law how I honestly feel.
Whoa, okay. That's huge.
It is. She carries that thought through her workday. Then, near the end of the day, she calls Minsu.
What does she say?
Basically, Minsu, I'm going over to your parents tonight. There's something I need to say.
And Minsu's reaction?
Pure support. The story quotes him as saying something like, okay, do what you feel is right. I trust your decision.
That consistency from him is just, wow, so important.
Crucial. It shows they're really a unit facing this.
Yeah.
So Jiyeon goes over after work.
How's the reception?
Her mother-in-law greets her warmly, apparently, but the story notes that, that critical look is still kind of there.
Okay, the tension's still palpable.
Yeah. So after dinner, Jiyeon takes a deep breath, and she speaks directly to her mother-in-law.
What does she say? The source gives us the words, right?
It does. She says, Mother, there's something I need to say. I've had a very difficult time. I tried to understand your words, but I've also worked hard in my own way.
Direct, honest, vulnerable.
Very. And the mother-in-law's reaction. Initially flustered, the story says, but then she responds calmly.
What did she say?
She says, yes, Jiyeon, I'm sorry I didn't understand your feelings. We worried about you in our own way, too.
Wow. An apology and an explanation, kind of.
Yeah. And hearing that, Jiyeon gets emotional, her eyes well up. She replies, Mother, I'll try to understand your feelings, too. I hope we can understand each other a little more.
That's quite a moment.
It really is. And what's key here, I think, is that it's not presented as like problem solved. But the story clearly indicates this honest exchange does significantly ease the tension.
It's a real step towards mutual understanding.
And critically, it's Jiyeon speaking her truth directly, not just Minsu running interference anymore.
Right. And the story tells us after this, Jiyeon feels genuine hope, like the relationship can gradually be repaired.
And on the way home, Minsu holds her hand.
And tells her,
You did well, Jiyeon. Because of you, I can work harder.
oh man, that partnership again, just reinforcing that her effort matters, that they matter.
Exactly. It shows how they're sustaining each other through this incredibly stressful time. Validating each other's struggles is so vital.
So part 4 ends there with this spark of hope.
Yeah, reignited in Jiyeon's heart. It leaves us at this point fragile hope, born from really difficult, honest talk, and backed by that solid spousal support.
It really makes you think about conflict resolution in families.
It does, because it's so rarely one big blow up and fix. It's usually a process, right?
Yeah.
Acknowledging pain, finding courage, finding those little bits of empathy, often over a long time.
Years in this case. So we know the sources structure this as a 5-part story. We've gone through 1 to 3, dived deep into this breakthrough in part 4. What about part 5? The title is intriguing. Again, the path we walk together.
Yeah, it really poses the question, doesn't it? After all this difficulty, after these small steps, what does walking together again actually mean for them now?
How do they build on that fragile hope from part 4?
Exactly. How do they make it stronger?
Well, the sources give a few hints, right? That part 5 involves Minsu planning something special for Jiyeon.
Yeah, a moment to reflect on their relationship, maybe acknowledge the toll all this stress has taken.
And it mentions revisiting a place from their past to reconnect with their earlier bond.
Which, thinking about the bigger picture, makes so much sense. Relationships need that consistent effort, that nurturing. Sometimes looking back at the why helps strengthen you against the what now.
Right, like actively choosing to focus on their connection.
The narrative seems to be setting up part 5 as showing them doing exactly that, prioritizing and nurturing their core relationship.
Okay, so the story leaves us at the end of part 4. Hope is back, communication happened, Minsu's support is unwavering, and we're poised to see how they continue their path together in part 5.
This whole deep dive into Minsu and Jiyeon's story, it just powerfully highlights the immense pressures so many couples face today.
Balancing work, family.
And those really complex, often tricky in-law dynamics. It just underscores how vital open communication is.
Truly seeing and validating what your partner is going through.
Yeah, and the surprising impact of just small acts of understanding how they can genuinely start to heal things, even deep-seated stuff.
It's such a strong reminder that change, especially in families, it's usually not fast or neat. It's gradual.
Often messy.
Definitely messy. And it takes real courage from everybody. But that commitment to each other, that partnership Minsu and Jiyeon demonstrate, that seems to be the foundation.
The bedrock, yeah. That helps them endure it all and hopefully find a way forward.
So we followed their journey as the sources laid it out, right up to that pivotal moment in part 4.
And we are really looking forward to exploring how their story concludes in part 5 in our next deep dive.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive, exploring these family dynamics and finding hope amid the challenges.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Until next time.
And maybe a final thought for you to chew on. thinking about that conversation in part 4 between Jiyeon and her mother-in-law. How does the simple act of speaking your truth, or maybe the even harder act of really hearing someone else's pain, how does that change the whole landscape of a relationship even before you find any solutions? Something to think about.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us keep making great content.